I'd like to call this session of the Bellingham City Council's Public Works Public Safety Committee to order. We have one item before us today. First off, joining me on the committee is Michael Lilliquist and Jack Weiss. The one item that we have today is a street overlay bid award. Ted?
Thank you, Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. As Councilmember Borneman suggested, we have a bid award today. This is our annual overlay program. We are recommending that the bid be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, which was Calicurcio Brothers Construction. Their bid was lower than the engineer's estimate. The engineer's estimate was $1.6 million, a little bit more than that. The bid came in at about $1.4 million. I will add to this that in addition to this contract, our annual overlay budget, we do have additional money budgeted, and that money will be used for a couple other projects, which I'd like to highlight so that you know that the money is being spent. $100,000 will go towards looking at the Holly Street overlay, which we would like to do in subsequent years. We're starting the design process on that. It's a little bit more complicated design than normal in that we are going to be identifying, working in conjunction with the planning department, the downtown street standards in terms of how do we deal with the aesthetics of the intersections and some of the other things that go along with paving downtown. In addition to that, we have $300,000 out of this year's overlay that will go towards the paving associated with the Bay Chestnut Bridge rehabilitation. And we do this from time to time where we take the annual paving money and we put it towards other projects that do need an overlay to be done in addition to the actual budgeted work. Like in the case of Bay Chestnut, we had budget for the bridge rehabilitation, but while we're in there working, we'd like to pave that section of the street as well. And then what we typically do is we hold money aside for next year's design. So we've held some money aside from the 2014 budget to start design on 2015 overlay, and we do that each year. And in addition to that, we always carry some contingency money. Even with that, because we got a favorable bid, we're seeing if we can add a couple more street sections to this year's bid just to maximize. We had a project budget of around $1.7 million for the paving, so we're working to find a couple $100,000 of additional streets that could be paved with this year's contract. So with that, a little bit more explanation as to why the budget or the project is lower than the budgeted amount. But staff does recommend to council that we award this bid.
Okay. Jack?
So Ted, on the Electric Avenue one, is that just the overlay of the concrete that's there now with asphalt, or does it also include any sort of curb and gutter, sidewalk stuff?
It's a good question. It's just overlaying the existing surface, so the existing concrete surface, and that's one that we spent quite a bit of time on. In fact, it's the reason why we're a little bit late this year in getting the overlay out. Our original concept was to go in and crack the concrete, so you go in with and you break the concrete panels up, then you come in with a very heavy roller and you seat the concrete down. WashDOT did a similar technique on I-5 a couple of years ago when they paved the concrete portion of I-5. And the reason you do that is it's can be a little bit challenging to overlay a concrete section with asphalt and not have the concrete panels where the brakes are and the concrete panels reflect up through the asphalt. So that was our original strategy, but going through that we ran into some design complications with the actual elevation and how drainage worked and how it would go interact with the shoulder. We changed course and we're going to be using a very heavy paving fabric. We've done that as well, and we've had some success with that, where you go in and you put down a paving fabric over the joints. You then do a very thin overlay over that, like a pre-level, and so that you're getting rid of those joints, and then you pave on top of that so that you eliminate that reflecting back up. Long explanation to the fact that the existing prism won't be widened and we won't be adding any curb and gutter at this time.
Okay, and then I mean, it's been sort of our policy that whenever we're overlaying any arterial, we try and put in bike lanes whenever it fits within our overall strategies.
Yes.
So I guess I'm concerned about that one, and also just wanting to know on the other projects whether or not any bike lanes will be installed on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, and if anyone's in the back, maybe they could come help me out on this. But we are, any public works staff that are watching in the conference room might come out and help me on this. I know we're adding bicycle lanes on Bay Chestnut. We did have the width. We have to change the intersection of Bay Chestnut. We're going to be eliminating a left turn movement, and that will allow us the width that we need to put bike lanes in all the way down the bridge, which is an important connection that came out of the bicycle plan, which Council will be seeing on August 11th, by the way. But if I don't get that answer here in this time, I'll come back tonight and let you know where we're adding bike lane, because I know when we have the width, we do that. You're exactly right.
Great, thank you. I'd move approval.
Okay. Michael?
I'm going to support approval too, but I do have a few questions. You said there's even a few $100,000 left over because of the lower bid, and you'll be looking for ways to use that this year. Will that have to come back to the council or not for those bids?
No, the way we do that is we view it as we have budget authority from council for an overlaid budget. The individual streets within that budget, we don't typically bring back to council. So we have about $250,000 that we're looking to add, and we have some ideas we'll work with the contractor on that. We may be able to just extend the project limits of streets we're already paving. We're also looking at James Street and whether or not we can use some of the overlay money on James Street as an extension of that project. So we wouldn't come back for council. The only time we would come back to council is if we need to exceed our budget and we were requesting additional budget authority.
So if you may extend some of this work, that'd just be a change order, and you just do it that way? Okay.
That's correct.
Michael?
I want to ask about Bay and Chestnut Bridge. I understand why if there's a repaving component, you may want to use repaving money, but then again, shouldn't the project pay for itself? So my question, though, is does the repaving money allow you to just repave Bay and Chestnut, or does that mean you'll be able to extend the paving surface out from the project itself, up these streets a block or two? Because that seems a very appropriate use, as opposed to just resurfacing where the work was.
Yeah, and it's the latter. It's extending the limit. So what we typically do is if we're working in an area, the bridge is a good example. The pavement right now on its own doesn't rise to the top of the repaving schedule. But since we're in there working on the bridge, we're going to have the bridge closed. We're going to add a couple things to the scope of the bridge contract. We're going to redo the approaches to the bridge, which aren't in the original scope of the grant that we got from the state. And that was a no-match grant. So anything outside the approved scope of the project from WashDOT is entirely locally funded. We looked at it and said, if you're going to close that main arterial for 6 months to rehabilitate the bridge, we should definitely add the approaches to the project. If you're adding the approaches, we should then pave to a reasonable, logical end of the project. So that's exactly what we're doing, and that's similar to the other projects where we take overlay money. We only put that on a project if that project should be overlaid sometime in the next 5 years or so. Let's go ahead and do it while the construction's out there, take advantage of all of the mobilization costs and pave it using overlay money at that time.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
And then finally, on Electric Avenue, it's over concrete, but in places where we're doing asphalt over asphalt, do we do anything like cold in place or recovery of the asphalt surface and then, add to the mix? Are we trying to reuse the materials to save on maybe cost as well as the footprint, the carbon footprint?
Yeah, that's another good question. It's something that we're always talking about. Should we do recycled in-place paving, where we go in and we do full-depth reclamation? We go through and we grind up all of the existing pavement down to the base, grind it up, use that aggregate along with new emulsions and oils for new paving. Our stormwater code, the way our stormwater code reads is if we do that, it's then treated as new impervious rather than repair and maintenance of existing impervious. And why that's important is if we do that on a regular street, that's already paved, and we go in and we do full depth reclamation, we expose the base, and then we go in and repave it with a pave in place process, we would then have to meet all of today's stormwater, both water quality and detention requirements, which we don't meet on all of our existing streets. We're working towards that, But because most of the transportation network was built prior to any of those requirements, we have sections of our transportation network that don't have water quality treatment or detention. It makes it very costly to go in and do it. So you eliminate some of the benefits that you talked about, you know, the benefit of reusing existing material and all of the emission reductions and benefit on climate action that you gain. The cost for the water quality and detention don't allow us to do that. That's something that we're looking at. One of the things we're working on is looking at the stormwater code so that we don't need to design around or not do certain things that in all other ways would be beneficial because of the way our stormwater code's written. Obviously, we want to get all the water quality and detention benefits at some time, but we also want to be able to use techniques like that make sense where they make sense. So we haven't done that yet. We've looked at it a lot, and like I said, we'll be pursuing our stormwater code to maybe potentially add things like that to it. It's not Ecology's manual that doesn't allow it. It's the city's stormwater code, which in many ways is more onerous than the manual.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and second before us. All those in favor of recommending approval to the full council tonight, answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? We will recommend approval tonight. That's the last item of our committee.
Thank you.